Okay, you guys, after sharing my story about like DV with my ex, I just need to do a video like flexing with how great of a husband I have now. I don't usually share pictures of my son, but these ones are older, so he don't look like that no more. This is a picture of my son and I, like right around the time I met my husband, a little before. I was single. I was pretty much taking care of like everything on my own. My son, he's autistic, so he had like an insane amount of appointments. I was working, just doing the grind. It was a lot, and honestly, I really didn't think I'd find like a stable long term relationship. I figured I'd just like casually date or whatever. I just felt like my life was very busy, and there was no way that anybody would be able to keep up with it. At this time, my husband was like 4 hours away. We hadn't met each other yet, obviously. He was in training for building construction technology. But we linked up on a dating site, right? And we really, neither one of us thought it would go anywhere serious, honestly. My husband was just getting sober, so he wasn't always stable, and me, I definitely wasn't in a place to have a serious relationship either. Like I said, I didn't even think it was a possibility. But we kept talking and we just like really hit it off. Both of us tried to like cut contact at times and like, go our separate ways, and we always found our way back to talking again. We just couldn't stay away for long. Now, even though my husband always has looked like a fucking lumberjack, I actually had already been transitioning longer than him. I was already on hormones, I had top surgery. He had just begun his transition. He's a trans male too. And about 3 years into my transition, my liver started to fail. It was probably about maybe a year or so into us talking. This is like the only thing I can show to illustrate that time. My face was horrible. Nobody's ever told me it was linked, but I only had acne like this, like really cystic, painful acne when my liver was failing on testosterone, so there is no way it was not related. In my opinion, I'm not a doctor. So this was a very hard time for me because I had to go off testosterone. Well, I didn't have to, but I could, continue and have my liver fail, or I could stop. And I have a kid, so I mean, he's number one priority. I was going to stop testosterone. But even if I didn't have a kid, I deserve to live. I still would have stopped. I'm worthy with or without a child. Us parents, we need to tell ourselves that frequently. And this was such a hard time for me. It was very scary because being on testosterone, that was like a monumental milestone and tool throughout my transition. And I was like terrified. Like I was terrified of watching all my changes revert. Like what was going to revert? When was it going to revert? So I just ripped off the band-aid. I figured instead of sitting here looking in the mirror or just waiting like what is going to change, what's going to happen, being scared shitless, I detransitioned and I started presenting feminine. Now, keep in mind, I had already been on hormones for years and had top surgery, and I went back to presenting as a woman. My thought was, at least I don't have to sit here and wonder, it's just done. I'm a very impulsive person. The thought of waiting for something so dreadful to happen, I can't. During this time, I actually ghosted on my husband because my husband, he's gay. He's a trans man, but he's gay. He likes men. So I was like, there is no way that, he's going to find me attractive this way. And it was kind of, it was like a vulnerable and embarrassing time, kind of. So I cut contact. But during this time, my husband, he reached out to me and he was like, obviously he wasn't my husband at the time. I'm just so used to calling him my husband. People are like, what's his name? His name's my husband. No, his name's Eli. But anyways, but he reached out to me. He was like, hey, is the reason you stopped talking to me because you detransitioned and you think I won't be attracted to you? And I'm like, yeah, well, obviously. And he was like, well, you're wrong. So we continued to talk to each other, but honestly, I was getting really antsy because we had been talking just like online, on FaceTime and stuff for, I think it was over a year. And he had a rule that he would not make it official until we met in person, which rational. But he was so far away. His training site was like 4 hours away. In his family home that he went to on the weekends, that was still 3.5 hours away. So the chances of us meeting up soon were pretty slim. And one day I had enough, and I told him that, if he wasn't going to make it official, we didn't have any plans on meeting, and I was just done. And he was like, wait a minute. He's like, I'm going to find a way to get down there and see you. I'm like, oh my God, it's like midnight. He's like, well, I'm going to find a way to get down there and see you, but when I do, this fighting ends. And I'm like, okay. and his friend let him borrow their car, drive all the way to see me. By the time he got here, I want to say it was like around 3 or something. So nothing was open except bars, and I'm sober, and he was trying to get sober, so we went to McDonald's. And I have like really bad anxiety in general, but back then I had a lot of anxiety when I detransitioned. And I told him, I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to sit down with you. I might have to keep going outside. Because in a lot of situations, like, I had to do that. I would have to go outside, get fresh air, come back in. But I was so comfortable around him that, like, instantaneously, like, I just never wanted to leave his side and vice versa. So the next weekend, I was so bummed because I wasn't going to be able to see him. He had to bring one of his friends up to New York to see his mom. But in the back of my head, I'm like, he's not going to be able to go a week without seeing me. He's just not going to be able to do it. And I was right. He called me last minute on a Friday. He's like, hey, you want to go to New York City? I'm like, hell yeah, I do. So yeah, he took me there. My mother-in-law got a hotel in Massachusetts, like near where I live. I mean, technically I'm in New Hampshire, but it's Mass. New Hampshire residents are so mad I said that, I bet. But anyways, my mother-in-law got a hotel for a weekend. I think it was the next weekend, or was it the weekend before? I don't know. It was at the beginning. And so I got to spend the entire weekend with my husband, and I got along great with my mother-in-law. It was great. This is us at a drag show. My husband was not completely sober yet here. I only stayed detransitioned for like a month and a half. This is literally so sweet, but one day my husband was driving me home. He was about to go back to Vermont to go back to training, and I like lost it. And he just knew it was wrong. He's like, "Are you thinking about transitioning back?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just can't do it anymore." And he was so understanding, and he brought me to Walmart. He had such little time left before he had to be back, but he took the time to bring me to Walmart, got me clippers so I could shave my head. He was so excited I was shaving my head again. He bought me like boxers, shirts, everything, because I always wear black tees. And I have to give a shout out to my in-laws, because my parents, they've had a long time to get used to my transitioning, detransitioning, because I've been through it more than once. But my in-laws, I mean, they were so accepting. Like, they never blinked an eye that I went from, they knew me as a male because they used to call me the shirtless man because my pictures on Facebook were always shirtless after I had top surgery. And then they met me as a woman, and I transitioned back to male, and they have always been so supportive, so kind, not judgmental at all. So this is possibly the most meaningful, thing anybody's ever done for me. So obviously, I've told my story with my ex or whatever, and we have a son, and I lost in court. He was awarded visitation even though he pled guilty to assaulting me. He had more victims than just me. And I mean, I'd be terrified every time my son was over there on the weekends because, like, I didn't know if he was safe. I had no control over the situation. My son wasn't verbal at the time, so he couldn't even convey to me if it was unsafe. And I had really bad anxiety. So when I would visit my husband on the weekends in Vermont, I was scared because I was like 3.5 hours away from my son, and I was terrified, like, what if something happens and I can't get to him? Because I would be terrified to drive from Vermont to New Hampshire by myself. Like, that's just something, I still would be nervous to do that. So my husband got sober and remained sober. He's been sober ever since then. Just so if he needed to drive me to my son, that he would be able to no matter what. I asked my husband to marry me shortly after he moved in because, like, I just knew. I actually told him before I even met him, like, I know this sounds crazy, but I know you're my soulmate, and I'm going to tell you the same thing when we're married years from now, and I do. But I asked him, and he wasn't ready yet, and he was like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, okay, whatever, he was really young. He was only probably, like, I don't know, 25 when he moved in. But then a year later, I was like, hey, you should marry me. And he's like, let's do it. So we literally found a justice of the peace, got married, and that was that. My husband is the true definition of my ride or die. And I say mine because I don't think he'd be that for anyone else, nor would I be that for anyone but him. He has been there for me through so much, and it's never changed, how he feels or views me, or it's never changed anything. Well, it did change things. It made our marriage stronger. I'm just so lucky, so I had to share that.